Asked me why my life turned out so great, I would tell you it's because my mother was a drug addict. And as a child, my mother was a heroin addict and ended up going to prison. But my two sisters, which were just slightly older than me, when we were all separated, they followed in her footsteps. And at the end of their lives, they're both deceased now. If you would have asked them how their lives turned out just so terribly, they would have both told you it was because their mother was a drug addict. If you asked me why my life turned out so great, I would tell you it's because my mother was a drug addict. And so therein lies mindset. That's it. In a nutshell, it's a choice. It's the pursuit of better choices.
Are you struggling to unlock your potential with a disciplined mindset? Are you struggling with positivity? Well, today's episode of the Asset Mindset Podcast is for you. We have a fantastic guest, Chris Harris, who is on mindset, absolutely crushing it, written many books. He has a new book out on mindset, which is why he's here on the Asset Mindset Podcast. Chris, welcome to the show, and please introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about you.
Hi, Daniel. Thank you. Glad to be here. I am a mindset specialist, I guess. I wouldn't say expert. I don't know if anyone's really become an expert on mindset. There's so much we don't know about it, but I'm definitely a specialist on it. I do a lot of keynote speaking. The book of mindset, which came out in January, is my 14th book. And I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with you about it.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here because we're all about transformation, not just motivation. A lot of people do motivational stuff, but to truly change your mindset and grow as an individual, it is incredible to have the proper resources, coaches, mentors, and actually work on it daily. So why don't you share your story of how you got into mindset and understanding how powerful it is?
Sure. Started off in my childhood, and I didn't have a word or a name for it back then. But in its simplest definition, mindset is being able to control or master that space, between a stimulus and the response or the reaction, if you will. And as a child, my mother was a heroin addict and ended up going to prison. But my two sisters, which were just slightly older than me, when we were all separated, they followed in her footsteps. And, at the end of their lives, they're both deceased now, but if you would have asked them how their lives turned out just so terribly, they would have both told you it was because their mother was a drug addict.
Mm.
If you asked me why my life turned out so great, I would tell you it's because my mother was a drug addict. And, so therein lies mindset. That's it. In a nutshell, it's a choice. It's the pursuit of better choices. And so growing up in multiple foster homes and homelessness, um, I kind of understood that no one was coming to save me. And so in my early 20s, I started training elite special forces. And I taught as a private contractor. I trained them for 25 years, and they are the epitome of mindset. When you think of mindset, you think of Green Berets and, Rangers and SEAL Team 6. And being around those guys for 25 years, I learned more about mindset than I actually taught. And then later in life, in my late 40s, after 25 years of doing that, physically, I couldn't do it anymore. And I had to pivot into corporate America.
Mm.
And I was amazed to see how much and how many of the principles that I learned and taught for those 25 years were absolutely applicable to crushing it in the business world. And so, and now I do a lot of keynote speaking, but most of what I talk about is mindset performance.
So you learned this through martial arts? Is it where it started as a kid or taking ownership? What was it?
Yeah, so no matter where I lived, by the time I was in the ninth grade, I had been to like 13 different public schools. And that's just how Child Protective Services worked back then. Everywhere you lived was kind of a temporary home. But that was a great thing for me
Mm.
because no matter where I lived, it was all within the city limits of Dayton, Ohio. There was always a different karate school. And so I would go and knock on the door and say, "Hey, I don't know how I'm going to live here, but I kind of play the orphan card a little bit, ain't gonna lie, but I would always offer to work in exchange for lessons. And so by the time I graduated high school, I had trained in a lot of different martial art styles, some for just a couple
Mm,
of months, some for, 6 months to 9 months. But I had all this bandwidth of all these different systems. I trained in the Koreans arts, in the Chinese arts, in the Japanese arts, and the Muay Thai. And so at 18, my gift to myself for my birthday was I enlisted into the military. And I had no idea how much knowledge I had collected throughout my childhood.
mm.
And I was very quickly noted that it was an asset. And so I served for 4 years, and when I got out, I created my own system based on all those years of kinda collecting the greatest hits. But I created a system called Roku Jitsu specifically for training military and special forces. And the barrier to entry, was very high, breaking into the Department of Defense as a contractor, uh, very hard to do. But once I broke in, I just kinda rode that thing like Seabiscuit, so
Love it, love it. And I love that you took ownership at a young age of your life. You talk about your sisters and their struggles and whatnot. What do you think keeps somebody in like a victim mentality? And how do you break through a victim mentality?
well, I'm not a psychologist, but I can just give you my opinion on it, because growing up, in the environment that I did, I was around a lot of, just broken people, a lot of addicts, and I think it's comfortable. I think it's comfortable, and,
Mm.
the identity hates change. It absolutely our ego hates change, and our ego is our identity. Someone asked me, a couple weeks ago, how would I, describe ego? How can I define it? And I said, well, it's simple. Anytime you use the word I, your ego is talking about itself. And I is the ego, and it's part of who we are, and it's important. It's part of that identity that shapes us. But ego is very protective, and it hates change. And so you have a lot of people who are in this entitlement, victim mentality, and you think, "Well, why are they like that?" Well, because their ego is protecting that because it hates change and it doesn't want to move off center. So getting someone to come out of that victim and entitlement mentality, it begins with awareness. And it has to be deliberate awareness. And that's the hardest step. There's a saying, I cannot heal what I do not acknowledge. Getting someone to raise their hand and say, "Hey, this ain't working. This really sucks. I'm broken, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." So first, you got to get into a place of awareness, which is not easy because identity and ego are basically guarding the gate. But then, if you can get into a place of awareness, then you got to find somebody who's willing to do the work. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, awareness is so important. I think people just get stuck in the monotony of day to day life or their surroundings or their environment that they don't realize that they're stuck sometimes. And they need somebody, a coach or a mentor to give them that little push or to, in a sense, take them on the other side of the grass or the tracks and show them, hey, the grass is greener over here. You can be over here if you make the choices and do the work. Because it is possible. You can look at so many different stories. Your story, for instance, where you grew up and what you went through, and look at you now, right? So, people can do it. How do you get someone to shift that mindset to realize they can do it?
Well, there's no greater example than someone who is in your life or just accessible to you. Maybe not a friend or an acquaintance, but just someone that you have access to. Maybe it's a leader of a book club. Maybe it's someone that's in the gym that you go to, and you see the results. If you've ever been in a gym, which I'm sure you have, but 95% of the people in the gym, they're exercising. Less than 5% of the people in that gym are actually training. And you could probably walk into any gym, Daniel, at 5 o'clock, a busy gym, a Lifetime Fitness type, LA Fitness, something to just packed at 5:30, and you could probably within 30 seconds distinguish between who's exercising and who's training, right? And so that's the first thing is you have to find someone who has it, right? Someone who has
Mm.
what you want, someone who's where you want to be. That's the person who's actually training, who's applying these principles. And then the next thing you have to do, you have to pursue them. And there's a saying, and I've always loved the saying, the evidence of desire is pursuit. So first and foremost, find somebody who's got what you want, and then two, pursue them with rigor.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you see someone that's been successful, this is one of the things, it's copy what they do. You learn from somebody, hey, this person is successful. This is what they do. That's the recipe for success. So it is out
Yeah.
there, but you have to be willing to do the work. So, how do you motivate people to take personal accountability?
If I can motivate people outside of just a carrot or a stick. To me, motivation, I like when people introduce me as a motivational speaker. To me, motivation is like, funnel cake and a turkey leg at the fair. I mean, it's for all good and, cotton candy. It tastes great and it has no nutritional value and an hourly you thinking about what's in it. So, um, to me, the only motivation that really sticks is self motivation, which, Harvard put out a study that basically concluded that the number one predictor of our professional career success throughout our lifetime, and that means earning too, right? How high we go, how much we make. But they said the number one predictor of our professional success was our emotional intelligence. And if you take a look at emotional intelligence, it's broken up into five pillars, right? Self awareness, self regulation, empathy, social skills. But the fifth one is, and they're not ranked in any particular order, but the fifth one is self motivation, the ability to motivate yourself from within without needing a carrot or a stick. And
Mm.
so if we know that that's, 20% of the formula for us being successful, and there's so many people that aren't successful, well, then we can say that self motivation is not an easy thing to come by. I can teach myself empathy, be an active listener and actually listen with my heart and maybe even move into the action part of empathy, which would be compassion. I can learn social skills. To really be good at social skills, just master the art of being a great listener. People will think you're like you got the highest level of social skills of anyone they've ever met. Oh my gosh, that guy's such a great communicator. And all you did was just turn your phone off and stare them in the eye and nodded the whole time. Self-regulation and self-awareness, those require some work because we have to get into the subconscious mind to fix those or to strengthen those. But out of those five, all of them can be improved upon. But I think self-motivation is the hardest one to improve upon.
Mm.
And the reason is, so I'll explain it this way. About 5% of what goes on from the time we wake up happens in our conscious mind. About 95% of what goes on from the time we wake up and when we're sleeping is our subconscious mind. And I say when we're sleeping because that's what's regulating our heart rate, our digestive system, blinking, breathing, holding our bladder. All of these things are done subconsciously. So 95% of what's going on is in this supercomputer, and we have no idea how it operates, but yet it's calling all the shots. Well, the gateway, well, I'm going to call it the bouncer. Okay. So you want to get into the subconscious mind because you want to rewire yourself. Okay. You want to break old habits. You want to create new habits. You want to create strong boundaries. You want to create new environments, all of these things. But between the conscious mind, because it's not going to happen in the conscious mind, I can tell you right now. Okay. You have to go down into the operating system. The conscious mind is like this computer screen. It's like the camera, the microphone, the speakers, the keyboard, the mouse. That's the conscious mind. But the hard drive is what we have to go in and rewrite if we want to change our lives. So, we're over here, with a little alcohol wipe, wiping down the screen, wondering why our lives not improving. But we got to debug or rewrite the operating system. But the problem is there's a bouncer that's standing between the two. And there's a cover charge, and that's the analytical mind. The analytical mind is the bouncer that's standing in front of the VIP rope saying, "Who are you? Who are you here to see? You're not on the list." And yet and we wonder why we can't get through there. So this is why, and I'm not one who really teaches. meditation or, hypnosis. I've never been a guy that's got into any of that because I believe you can rewire it without getting into that stuff. And it's just never been my flavor. There's a lot of people that do it and I would never criticize it or bet against it. But I don't think you have to have hypnosis or deep meditation to fix it because I've been rewiring my subconscious mind my entire life. Every time I have an identity shift, every time I pivot, every time I level up, every time I set an impossible goal. And I've never had to meditate or go through hypnosis to do it. So, um, but the way that you do it is you have to silence or settle that analytical mind. You have to get the bouncer distracted. And there's a lot of ways that we can do that without having to, you know, sit with our legs crossed and in a silent environment. There's other ways to do it. But understand that the only language that the subconscious mind responds to is emotionally based repetition. That's it. That's what rewrites it. It's got to be repetitive. That's it. Look, it's a recorder. It records all day, every day, and doesn't it doesn't take into consideration if something is truth or something is lie. It could care less. It doesn't get into that. If it's repeated with emotion, I'm documenting it. And so and it's real time. The subconscious mind is not future and it's not past. It's right now. And
Mm.
so, we have to understand if it's emotionally based repetition that rewrites it, can we feed it that? Well, absolutely we can. If we understand that that's the only thing it responds to.
Well, I think that's so important. You talk about repetition. I think being in the now, in the moment, stop looking in the past. There's that analogy out there. Hey, you're driving in your car. You're not going to get anywhere if you just keep looking in the rearview mirror. You have to look out the windshield. You have to look ahead. You have to be present where you are now, driving down the road of life. And I think that is key. So, how do you help pull somebody in the now? Because that's something I try and work with people is to get them in the now, in the present. What are some of the techniques you do?
Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to square them in the eye and ask them, do you want to change? And you need an honest response. And if they say yes, then say, okay, what are you willing to pay for that change? Like, what's the price you're willing to pay? Somebody tells me that they've established a new goal, that meets all the requirements of a goal, which means it's time bound and it's measurable and all that. The first thing I'm going to say is, okay, great. But before I take you serious here, I want to know, what are you willing to pay to accomplish that goal? What is the price you're willing to pay? And if they go, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, there's going to be a price that has to be paid. There's going to be a tax. And you need to acknowledge that there's going to be a very large bill that is going to be due. And that is going to maybe be setting very hard boundaries with people you love, cutting people out of your life, getting it 2 hours earlier than you're used to, going to bed earlier, giving it things that you love, sacrifice, whatever, pain, suffering. Are you willing to pay the price to achieve this goal that you're declaring? And if they're like, well, I don't know. I've never really looked at it that way. Well, go look at it that way and then come back and have the conversation with me. So the first thing is getting someone to understand that you can have just about anything you want if you're willing to put in the work. Are you willing to put in the work? Do you acknowledge that you need change in this area of your life? Or do you acknowledge that in order to accomplish this impossible goal, you're going to have to rewire, reprogram, rewrite your subconscious mind? That's a lot of work. Are you willing to do it? And when you find that 1 out of 10, that says absolutely whatever it takes, all in, locked in, now you lay out the framework for them. I'm a big fan of throwing down the rope, Daniel, but I'm not going to pull the rope. I will anchor the rope. I will look down and encourage you, but it's hand over hand. Okay. But I'm not going to pull the rope because if I pull the rope, I have just weakened you. But I will certainly hold that rope for you, encourage you every step of the way as you climb it.
Absolutely. And that's why the best coaches do an interview and find out if someone's worth working with. They have to be serious. They have to be willing to pay the costs. There's a toll. There's sacrifices for anything you want, whatever it is. You got to sacrifice your time. You got to sacrifice your efforts. You got to sacrifice things you maybe enjoy, like a bowl of ice cream or eating candy bars or cupcakes or whatever it is. If you want the outcome, you got to pay the price. And I love that you share that. And that's why I think you have the asset mindset and you're on the show. So anybody that's out there liking what we're talking about, please do something positive. Give us a like, follow, and share. And definitely go in the description. Find out about Chris Harris and the Warrior Maker and all 14 books he has and his newest book, The Book of Mindset. Please support us because we're trying to support others out there to do better and to improve the world and make changes in their life. So
Well,
boundaries, we just talked about them. Oh, you
Daniel,
got
let me
something
say
you want to
something.
go?
Yeah,
Go
real
for it.
quick, before I forget it, you said something about paying the toll just before we segued here, and I will say it, and I love that paying the toll. But most people have gotten used to having a toll tag. There are no toll tags in transformation. All right. You have to literally, you remember back in the day when tolls first came out and every toll you had to go through the booth and you had to have like cash, like
Oh, yeah, yeah.
change.
I'm old enough for all that.
Yeah. And they didn't take pennies and they didn't take credit cards. And if you were going to get on that road and you knew there were X amount of tolls, you better look in the ashtray and figure out, do you have enough and are you willing to pay it? Because by the time from here to there is going to cost X amount of dollars and you better have it or you're going to be pulling over and somebody's going to be filling out a form on what you got to, go to the toll tag office and pay. And you really had to think it through. There was no toll tags to where at the end of the month you just got a bill and it was automatically paid with your credit card. And that's what transformation looks like. Every toll booth extracts a price.
Hmm. I like that because it's a constant thing. And I think we get too lackadaisical. And we're in a society now where everybody wants instant gratification. And that's change doesn't happen instantly. It just doesn't. You have to build the habits. You have to be committed. You have to take ownership of the changes you want. It's so important.
Well, I'll tell you, on that point, um, there is something that can happen instantly. And I think if someone were to ask me, hey, the number one like contributing factor to people who actually do transform their lives, like out of all the people that say, I'm going to go to the gym and transform my body, or I'm going to go back to college and finish my degree, or I'm going to, whatever, I'm going to become number one in the world selling the product that I sell, whatever it is. And let's just say for every 10 that make that declaration, one actually do it. Okay. And I don't know what the stats are. I do know that as far as people setting New Year's resolutions and goals and all that, they've done those studies, and the numbers are staggeringly low on how many actually follow through. But if I were to tell you, if you were to ask me, what is the number one thing those people who make it have that the other 90% don't? It's metacognition, hands down. Metacognition goes so much further than awareness. Awareness would be like you're driving down the road, down the highway, and you're kind of listening to your music, and it's a beautiful day. Maybe you're taking a phone call, talking on Bluetooth, but you're not really paying attention to your speed. And all of a sudden, you look over and you see a trooper on the side of the road, parked, and you know what he's doing, right? He's paying attention to your speed. And how quickly does your awareness kick in and you look at your speedometer to see how fast you're going? I mean, it's in the blink of an eye, right? And something triggered that awareness. Seeing that trooper triggered that awareness. And in microseconds, you're immediately calculating, okay, what is the speed limit here? And what am I going? And of course, you're tapping the brake immediately, regardless of, whether you're speeding or not. And that's awareness. And those people are the ones, people who have awareness are the ones that don't need the trooper on the side of the road to know that you're driving 80 and a 60. Okay. But if you have to have the trooper right there, on the right side, and now all of a sudden you're thinking about a $300 ticket, you're thinking of the consequences, you're thinking of carrot and stick and all of this stuff. Oh gosh, I'm looking in my rearview mirror. I hope he doesn't get behind me. That's awareness. But that's a very low level of awareness. The person who is looking at the speed limit sign and paying attention to how fast they're going, and they don't need to see the trooper on the side of the road. That's a person who has awareness. Okay, but metacognition, this is what the 1 out of 10 that make it have. And I've got a chapter in my book about it, and it's called Thinking About Your Thinking. Metacognition is someone who basically they don't just pay attention to what speed they're driving, and they don't pay attention to the speed limit. They literally are thinking about, okay, why am I driving 80 in a 60? And I don't need the trooper for me to be thinking about this. I just need to understand the fact that I'm driving faster than I should be. Why? Well, you're in a hurry. Why am I in a hurry? And all of this conversation is going on like in microseconds. And it's like you're watching yourself on video and you're analyzing yourself. And it's like a muscle. And if you can get into metacognition, thinking about what you're thinking and why you're thinking it, you are self improving at the speed of light. So when you say, well, it doesn't happen instantly, it doesn't. You're absolutely right. For people who have baseline awareness, it doesn't. It's a long process. But people who understand the power of metacognition and like literally every day it gets stronger and stronger. And then all of a sudden they don't know how to not think about what they're thinking. These are the people who literally hockey stick their transformation. I've seen it. I've seen people who they come back to me, they go, "This metacognition thing, man." I'm like, I'm brushing my teeth and thinking, "Why am I brushing this side of my mouth longer than this si—" Like, I'm like, "You got it." And what happens is they're literally rewriting their subconscious mind in real time, and each and every day they become stronger.
No, I really like that metacognition. I'm gonna definitely dive deep into that more myself because I teach some of that as far as I have an analogy that I use with people as a page master, and I wrote in my book, like, you need to be aware of what you're reading in your life. And if it's not a good thing, it's a negative, you're the page master, man, of your life, your book. You can turn the page. You can turn it to another chapter. If you're struggling and not paying attention and you're just like skimming through the book or reading the same victim mentality stuff over and over again, this happened to me, this happened to me. Well, you're a human being and you have this great ability, like you said, supercomputer in your head. Like
Mhm,
program it to, all right, I'm going to turn the page. This is not where I want to be focused on. And if you're constantly looking at your book and you're reading about your life and yourself and doing that self awareness and assessment, that's a game changer. Absolutely.
mhm.
So I started to ask you about boundaries. Let's talk about boundaries because a lot of people, I think, get stuck in an environment or toxic relationships or whatever it may be. How can setting good boundaries protect you or help facilitate change?
Well, the boundaries are not really about the boundaries themselves. The boundaries are about the environment that you have to have in order to transform your life. If you have an area that you want to transform, um, then you have to say, okay, let's look at the environment that I currently have because the environment that I currently have is conducive, right, to the life that I have. They go hand in hand. They're symbiotic. My environment and my life are symbiotic. And so I want to transform my life in this area. And let's just say let's say you want to transform your body physically, but you go to lunch every day with the same people. And you go to you get burgers on Tuesday, you get tacos on Thursday, on Friday Bill brings the donuts, whatever it is. Well, that's part of your environment. And so when we set boundaries, it's not for the sake of a boundary. It's because I have to create a new environment that is conducive to where I'm going, right? And then I have to I got to put up an electric fence to protect that environment. Otherwise, the environment does not exist. All right. Because nobody respects weak, no trespassing signs. Nobody, all right? If I was a teenager and all you had up was some rusty barbed wire and a no trespassing sign, kinda stapled to the tree, and I wanted to go back there and drink beer with my buddies, we were gonna go back there and drink beer, all right? But if you had an electric fence and a couple Dobermans, we're gonna find another field. And so, um, when we talk about boundaries, what we're really talking about is you've identified the environment that's not working, the one that's got you here or kept you here. Now we're identifying, and this all comes down to awareness, right? Now we're identifying the environment that you need to have. And now we're like, all right, how powerful, how strong do these boundaries need to be to make sure that that environment does not get encroached upon? And it's really tough because when we talk about setting boundaries, what we're really talking about is being alone. Nobody likes to be alone. I mean, I shouldn't say nobody, but very few people like to be alone because being alone can oftentimes lead to feeling lonely. And so when you establish boundaries, you have to understand that you're gonna lose some friends. And maybe you're gonna lose a lot of acquaintances that you thought were friends, right? I don't know that you're really gonna lose a real friend because a real
Mhm.
friend is gonna say, "Hey, whatever it takes." If you're trying to stop drinking and I don't wanna stop drinking, I tell you what I'm gonna do. Out of respect for you and your goal, whenever we go out to lunch, I'm not having a beer. I'm not gonna do it. And, not that I can't have a beer and not that you mind if I have a beer, but man, I'm 100% behind you. I am your biggest fan. Alright, so that's a friend, right? The people that are constantly dogging you about your boundaries and giving you a hard time and trying to get you to put the gate down, those probably aren't friends anyway. But you have to understand when you create a new environment and then you establish firm boundaries to protect that environment, you're going to lose some relationships and you might spend some Friday nights home alone watching Netflix.
Yes, absolutely. But this gives you an opportunity to create new circles or people that respect the boundaries, and then you can grow. I love the analogy where it's like you can level up and you get loss of friends, but then you get new friends as you level up. People that are stepping up and, hey, all right, we're not going to party and every Friday night go to the bar and stay there till close and then wake up Saturday hungover. You get Friday, you get together with some guys and you're, I don't know, business planning, you're coaching, you're working on some, I don't know, woodcraft or whatever it may do, or whatever you might be doing. Those people are gonna accept and acknowledge your boundaries, like you said, true friends. How
Well,
important
and
is it to have well,
yeah,
go
so
ahead.
you're going to have to find relationships that meet two criteria. They can't meet one of the two. It won't work. You're gonna when you want to level up your life, you have to build new relationships that are aligned in both interest and values. If you build relationships to where they're aligned in your interest but not your values, well, I can tell you right now, I know people who are aligned in my interests but not my values. I may go hang out with you and have a good time, but you're not watching my kids. All right. And I may have people that I'm aligned in values but not interest. You most certainly can watch my kids. I encourage you to watch my kids. We're aligned in values, but I don't want to spend the weekend with you because we're not aligned in interest and we're probably going to be bored to death. But when you can find someone that meets both criteria, and then another thing I want to say to this is when I ask someone, what are you willing to pay? Right? What's the cost you're willing to pay? One of those things needs to be relationships. I'm willing to give up
Mm,
some relationships in order to achieve this goal. And if they don't mention relationships, I will ask them. And if I'm doing an executive coaching call, I will say, are there some relationships that you're willing to part ways with to achieve this? Because not everybody's going where you're going.
mhm,
In fact,
absolutely.
there's going to be a lot of people who judge you as they see you starting to transform. Misery loves company.
Yep, I use, the crab mentality or crabs in a bucket. You know, when
Hmm.
people are down in the bucket, they don't want anybody else getting out. You start climbing out, the crab grabs the other crab and pulls it back down in. You don't wanna be stuck around crab heads or be in the bucket with crabs. You gotta bust out and move on and go to where you wanna go. It's absolutely possible. It just costs, like you said. So, how important is these people around you and environments?
It's everything.
Mm,
It's everything. Uh, I don't know if you remember the old Rocky movie where Rocky fought. I don't know if it was 3 or 4 or whatever, but he fought Clubber Lang. which was Mr. T.
Yep.
And, Mr. T was a nobody who was going to be the heavyweight champion of the world. He made up his mind. But, that's what your life can look like for a while. I mean, if you remember that movie, he was in the cellar working out, you know, water dripping from the pipes, rats in the corner, just a swinging dim light bulb. But all he was focused on was becoming the heavyweight champion of the world and beating Creed, or beating Rocky to do it. And, you've got to, I hope that you don't have to, lay low and get strong in the cellar, the damp, musty cellar with rats by yourself. I hope that that's not the case, but you need to be willing to.
Yeah, you're keying in right there on passion and purpose, right?
Absolutely. Most certainly you are. And,
So,
yeah, you better know your why.
yeah, passion and purpose is so powerful. You talk about Clubber Lang, which is ironic because in my book I actually mentioned Clubber Lang.
Okay,
So
great.
that's kind of funny. But yeah, you have to have that desire and I don't care. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. The focus, the drive. And people need to tap into that. And they need to understand they have the potential to do it. I think a lot of people think that, oh, that's outside of me. I can't. I can't. So when someone's stuck in the, oh, I can't, how do you shake them out of that?
Well, I don't really get into, any specific faith, but I believe they have to have faith in something. But I don't get into the one denomination or the other. Do you have faith in something bigger than yourself? Yes, I do. Okay. Can you share with me just broadly what that is? Because, this is where we derive our faith is where one, it's a huge part of our identity. So if you have no faith in anything outside or above and beyond yourself, I don't know what's driving you. Like, right? I mean, faith is where our identity is shaped. It's where we derive what we believe right from wrong is. A lot of the fuel for our passion, our why, our purpose is derived from our faith. So if somebody tells me, "Nah, I really don't believe in anything," okay, like you're agnostic, you're atheist, I don't believe in nothing. Like I'm not your coach.
Hmm.
I can't help you because I've got nothing to leverage. So, you know, but like for people who are, and I'll just use the Bible for example, because the Bible is the most widely read and distributed book in the world, right? Like over 5 billion copies have been distributed worldwide. So that makes it a pretty cool source to cite. But I would tell people this, if you want to know what you're capable of, like how high is the ceiling? And if someone tells me that they believe in the Bible, then I just go to one scripture. I say Jesus says that the kingdom of God lives where?
In you.
In you. Okay, so you're telling me that the kingdom of God, according to this prophet, right? You're telling me that he says that the kingdom of God lives within you? So tell me what your perspective is of the kingdom of God. Like, what are its limits? How far does it go? Where's its boundaries? Where's the guardrails? Well, it's limitless. It's limitless, and it lives within you, not outside of you. It's internal, and I'll use that like as a foundation for now. You tell me what you think your limitations are.
Well, I love it. That's powerful. I use creator. You are a creator. You're made in the image of God. He's a creator. All of us people are creators. We create our
Absolutely,
lives. We create things. We are inventors. We create friendships. If you're a human being, you're a creator. You can create your life. You
we
can
create our
create,
struggle. We create our
yes,
hell.
absolutely. And I think
We
when that
we
light bulb
create
goes on,
our worst nightmare imaginable.
yeah. And
You
I
you
think
can
when
you can
people are
create
stuck
whatever
like
you
that,
want.
yeah, when people are stuck like that, I try and shift them over to, all right, I acknowledge these things you're saying, like, oh, the worst thing that could happen to me, if I tried to be a singer and I went out there and I made a fool out of myself. Okay, that's the worst thing. What's the best thing? Because that's a possibility too, right? All things are
Absolutely.
possible. So don't just be stuck on the negative possibility. there's the possibility of something fantastic happening. And learn how to face fear. And bravery and courage when you face your fears or what you're worried about is that's those are the game changers. That's when special moments are made. That's when breakthroughs are done.
Mhm.
Nobody, if you look at any hero, any movie, you mentioned Rocky, what? He had obstacles. He got knocked down, but he got back up. That's life. You're going to get knocked down. You got to get back up. And if you don't and you just lay there, well, that's on you. Nobody's going to pick you up and walk for you.
You know, and I wanna add to that. I think if you're gonna set some goals and try to transform at least one area of your life, maybe all of it, you're going to have something that grit can attach its teeth to, okay? Because grit's what's gonna get you through it when it's hard. And so the first thing I would tell people is let's redefine failure. Failure, the definition of failure is either not starting or willfully quitting, okay? Or if you tell me you're not gonna start because you're afraid of failing, then what you're saying is, "I'm not gonna start because I'm afraid of quitting." Well, no, I'm not afraid of quitting. Okay, so you're not afraid of quitting. Are you afraid of starting? Well, no. Well, then there cannot be failure. If you know you're going to start and you know you won't quit, then where is failure live? Well, what if I don't succeed? No, as long as you start and you don't quit, you've succeeded. And so you got to get them to redefine what failure means. Failure means I either didn't start or I did start and I gave up. Okay. Most people, when they go through SEAL training, and we all know that the numbers are, really low. Like the number of people that say, I want to be a SEAL and then actually go to Budge training and then actually, don't ring the bell, don't give up, don't quit. That the number of the ones that actually make it are really, really low. But most people don't understand that the majority of people that don't make it, like some instructor didn't just come over to you and say, you're out. The majority of them that don't make it, either they didn't meet the bare qualifications, the minimum qualifications that are literally online. Like before you decide you want to go to SEAL training, you can see how long you have to run a mile in and how many push-ups in 3 minutes. And like it's right there.
Mhm.
And so if you go not being able to do those things, shame on you. Like, right? The majority of the people that don't make it either quit or they get an injury. But if you get an injury, you get to do it again. So if you rang the bell, you willingly walked over to the grinder and you rang the bell 3 times, you're quitting. Now that's failure. But having an saying that you've failed because you tried and you got an injury and so therefore you didn't make it, that's not quitting. And so we look at the majority of people that don't make it. The majority of people that don't make it quit. That's failure. But all the rest, I don't consider that failure at all. So you got to get your head right about what failure is. Did you literally walk over to the bell and ring it 3 times? Because if you do, that's failure. In my opinion, anytime I embark upon a new endeavor, a new goal, something really ambitious, to me, I can't fail. I will either learn or I will win. Period. There's nothing in the middle because I know I'm not quitting, and if I've already started in my mind, I'm all in. So um, I think people just they we've got some messed up definitions of failure. People think if I start and I give it my all and I mortgage the house and I lay it on the line and I'm willing to be homeless and sleep in my car until I make it, but for whatever reason it still didn't work out, they think they failed. Are you kidding? You're my hero.
Yep. No, that's powerful. And how we define things is so important. I mean, I saw that. I saw people quit, that had all the ability in the world. I watched a guy had a perfect PT score, could do all the push ups, do all the things. But when he was out by himself, alone in the woods, he quit, and it's incredible to see that. And you have to have a strong mind and you have to make up your mind and make a decision that, hey, I am going down this road. And like you said, you may not get to the end of the road, but just because you didn't get to the end of the road didn't mean you failed. You might have learned. Maybe there was something that you took away from it that's going to help you later on in life. So I like the way you're redefining failure. That's powerful stuff right there. I want
Well,
to ask you
and
about
oh, go ahead, Andy.
I want to ask you about faith though, because you mentioned faith earlier and how people need faith. You had a really rough upbringing and growing up. Where did you find your faith? What was it in that made you believe that you could
Uh,
do the things you're doing?
well, first of all, great question. I don't think I found faith. I think my faith found me. Um, because I believe, that even faith, that the faith that I have in God, I believe that in itself is a gift from God. Um, so, but that's just my perspective. You know, I didn't know anything about God until I was in my office in downtown Dallas. I was probably, I don't know, 26, 27 years old. Had a little bit of success, was, looking at my out my window. I was in a mid-rise building looking over the city. Dallas is beautiful lit up at night. It was just a beautiful evening. I had a little bit of money, a little bit of notoriety. I was to that age where I was really reading my own press releases. I was high on my own supply. I had the lowest level Rolex watch, like the stainless steel Submariner, but the one that didn't have the
Hey,
date.
hey, hey, hey. No.
But yeah, but hey, and it was a great watch. I loved it. And, but I had it for the wrong reason. I had the watch. I had it for the wrong reason. I had the car that I was leasing. I had it for the wrong reason. And so, and believe me, I've had many nice watches and nice cars throughout my lifetime, and I love having that stuff. But to me, they're milestones, right? They're milestones that I'm rewarding or looking back to something that was very special, something that I achieved. But back then, I didn't. They weren't milestones. They were points of conversation for bragging, and what I was really after back then was the praise of man. And, I wanted approval, I wanted affirmation, I wanted attention, I wanted all these things. So it was the worst part of ego, not the best part of ego. And, but I'm looking out the window of my office in Dallas and I'm like, man, this just feels empty. Like there's got to be more to life than this. I had what would you call it? I had pleasure, but I didn't have any
Mm.
joy. Like pleasure, it wears off, and you wake up in the morning and you're heading home, and, from whatever you were doing, and like the pleasure's gone. But joy, man, that just it's like a state. It's a being. It's not this emotional roller coaster. And I didn't have joy in my life. And I had a moment, a spiritual moment, and I fell to my knees in my mid-rise office, and I basically in that moment with me on the knees of my floor of my office, um, I basically asked forgiveness for everything, and I forgave anyone I could think of that ever hurt me or wronged me. And I stood up in that office in that evening. I stood up a free man, and I went out and I bought a Bible and I changed my environment. I lost all my friends. I quit doing the things I was doing. And what I was really seeking was truth.
Mm.
I wanted to know there had to be more to this life than money and possessions and approval and all of these things. And there had to be more. And I went on a journey, literally a 1 year journey, and I read the Bible from cover to cover. And I mean, when I say I read it, like I memorized a lot of it, right? I went out and bought this thing called a concordance, like where you're looking words up and stuff. And a year later, I met my wife. I started going to
Mm.
church, and a year later, I met my wife. Very big church, tens of 12,000 people at the time. But anyway, her sister introduced me to her on a blind date, set me up on a blind date with her sister, and now this is a woman who only knew God her whole life. Like no
Mm.
backsliding, no straying, preacher's kid, like really good quality human being, right? And I met her on a blind date, and 10 days later, I proposed to her. 10 weeks later, we were married, and we just celebrated our 30th anniversary. And so I will tell you that for the first year, I learned about faith just from hard work and research and just the grind, right? Um, but the next 29 years, I've it's just been through example from just being around somebody who truly just has an angelic soul and really sees the best in humanity, sees the best in, it could see the worst, but chooses not to. And so I would say that 1 year of my journey was just, going to SEAL training in the Bible, and the next 29 years was just being consistently around someone who lived the word.
I love it. What a powerful testimonial. Thank you for sharing that here on the Asset Mindset podcast. Seriously, that's an incredible story, and I think it'll give hope and a lot of inspiration to others. And just side note, my stainless steel watch was a gift. I didn't buy it myself. Thank you to one of my teammates out there,
I
Ryan.
am
God
not.
bless you, brother.
I'm not dogging Rolexes. I've had many of them over the years. Look, I
No,
don't think
great
God.
watch, but
I don't think God cares about us with the Rolexes and the cars and the houses, and I don't think He cares about any of that. I think what He cares about is why. Because in the end of the day, He's a God of motives. I don't think He cares about the what. I think He cares about the why. What was screwed up back then was my why.
Mhm. I think that's powerful right there. The why. People need to find their why. They need to understand their why. You have that. That's your foundation to build on. Do you find that and agree with that as well?
Oh gosh, I had a really gifted quarterback. I was doing some executive coaching with him. Really gifted quarterback, and he was kind of coming to that place of awareness where, like I did in my office, and he realized there had to be more, right? And he said to me, he said, and I have two different rates that I charge. There's my coaching rate and there's my consulting rate. And my consulting rate is twice as much per hour as my coaching rate. I kid you not, it's double
Mhm.
exactly. And a lot of times people ask me, well, why is your consulting rate twice as high? Like, I don't understand. What's the difference between coaching and consulting? And I say, well, if I'm coaching you, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions and find out what you're trying to accomplish and where the obstacles are and all that. And then I'm going to help you come to the decision of what you need to do to get to where you want to be. Right. I'm going to help lead you to that decision. And let's just say that takes 10 hours. Consulting, I'm going to ask all the same questions, and then I'm just going to tell you how to do it. And we're going to get there in 5 hours. So, you know, at the end of the day, you're paying the same amount because one of them we're going to get there in five, one we're going to get there in 10. It just comes down to this. Do you want to get there on your own, or do you want someone just to say, hey, be quiet. Just tell me how to get there. Right. And,
Yeah.
and, and because you got both. Well, this was a guy, very, very successful quarterback. And he's like, man, I just want the consulting rate or forget the coaching. I want to get there as quickly as possible. I'm willing to pay twice as much and get there in half the time. Just give me the directions out of this pit I'm in. Okay. And what it came down to was he said, look, he said, my whole life, he said, I was really good at football because I wanted to impress the girls.
Mm.
He said, I worked harder. I ran twice as much. I showed up to practice early. I did extra push-ups. I did everything above and beyond because I wanted to impress the girls. And as I said, and what did that result in? He's like, well, I became a great quarterback. That was my motive. And now here I am, and I've got all this success and I've achieved all these things. And now I realize that this probably isn't all that pleasing to God.
Mm.
And he was literally thinking about getting out of football. And I said, brother, football is not the problem. You don't have to change anything about what you're doing. The only thing you have to change is why you're doing it.
Mhm.
You keep throwing that football the way you do, just change your why. A lot of times we realize that there's got to be some meaningful change in our life because we're heading, down this really destructive place, to where we're just going through friends and relationships, like there's just a trail behind us of carnage. And we realize, I have no joy in my life. I can't keep a friend, whatever. I have no meaningful relationships. Everything's so fake. And we come to that conclusion and we immediately think that we have to change all of this stuff in our life. And you don't. You don't have to change anything but one thing. And that is why you're doing it. Just change your motives. And that's good enough for God.
Absolutely. If you have the right motives and the why, man, it's game changer. I know I've seen so many people find their why and then be able to accomplish so many things. And when you have your why, you can find peace because when you don't have a why, there's a piece of you missing. So you're incomplete. So you can't really feel comfortable and you're not whole. You find your why and that missing puzzle piece, man, it can really complete you in your life.
And for those of people that want to know how to find your why, there's three steps to it. And I call it pain, pull, and proof. So the first one is write down something from your past that there was a lot of pain, because I can assure you somehow that pain is going to be connected to your new why. Okay. The second thing is write down something you feel pulled toward. Okay. Something I just really feel pulled toward this. Write that down. Okay. And the third one is proof. Write down something that you've overcome in your life that is proof that in that area you've got grit, you've got grind, you got hustle. Write down one pain point, something that's pulling you, and then one point of proof. And then at the intersection of all of those three, you will find your why.
Hmm. That's powerful stuff right there. I hope the audience really write that down. We got pain, the pull, and your proof. And is that talked about in any particular book of your 14 books?
That's in the book of mindset. It's got a
The
whole
book of
chapter
mindset. Okay.
committed to it. And if they want to Google it, I wrote an article that's in Forbes about it last month. So if you Google pain pull proof, it'll come up in Forbes.
Fantastic. Please, listeners out there, give us a like, follow, and share. Share this with somebody who needs to hear it. Be positive, do positive things, and please support us in what we're trying to do. Chris, I would love to ask you one more thing, and that is what do you attribute your success overall to?
You know, this sounds cliche, um, but honestly, I've always look, at the end of the day, it goes back to God. Um, but I've always had a gift of gratitude.
Hmm.
Even homeless as a child, sleeping under cold bridges and eating out of dumpsters. I was grateful. Even being a 10-year-old boy, shooting my mother up with heroin, because she couldn't shoot herself up with heroin because she was so strung out. I don't, I just don't ever remember a time in my life that I wasn't grateful. And that is a gift. And, I look back, I didn't, come to know God until, I mean, probably 26, 27 years old. But I look back to my whole life and, when you say, you hear someone say God was always watching out for me or angels were looking over me long before I even knew him, he knew me. You hear all
Hmm.
that. Well, to me, I would say God was looking out for me my whole life through the gift of gratitude. That's how he looked after me.
Hmm.
He protected me from myself with gratitude. He protected me from self-pity through the gift of gratitude, and he protected me from the potential pain of entitlement through gratitude. All the things that could have turned on me or against me, I was protected because the gift of gratitude was strong before I even had language for it.
Hmm.
So when people say, "Oh yeah, God was looking after me long before I knew him," I would ask them, "How was he looking after you?"
Yeah, that's powerful stuff. I'm so proud of you, brother, for the work you're doing, what you've done in life, the obstacles you've overcome, the supporting the military training, my regiment and others. Seriously, you're doing great things in this world, and I'm proud to call you an asset mindset teammate. That's why I had you here on the show, because your mindset and what you're doing, you're, a brother from another mother. And I'm grateful to have you here once again. And please, people out there, give Chris a follow, check him out, see what he's doing. And always, no matter what, remember you're more powerful than you realize, and own your power.